It is 64 years since this event has come to represent women's courage and strength in South Africa. Throughout the years, women continue to look for ways to make their voices heard and narrate their own stories. South Africa commemorates Women's Month in August, and we take this opportunity through this webinar titled Our Stories Matter, a dialogue with women in law, to celebrate phenomenal women of South Africa. My name is Tilly Kader, and I am sharing the moderator role for today's webinar with my colleague, Abongile Shumani. Today's dialogue is being hosted by LegalWise in collaboration with probono.org. Abongile will now take us through a few housekeeping rules and introduce our panelists.
Thank you, Tilly. Today's webinar is scheduled until 2 p.m. and is being recorded. We will be sharing the link with you after the event is complete, and all dialed-in participants will be muted and their videos switched off for the duration of the event. The chat box will be open during the session, and you are most welcome to post your questions and comments via this functionality during the dialogue. Please note that there will be a very brief survey once the webinar ends, which we ask that you kindly complete. We are joined by our two lovely hosts, Siva Gangen and Teresa Yates. Siva Gangen is the Chief Executive Officer of LegalWise South Africa. She is a high-performance management professional with over 25 years' experience in the insurance sector. She is an attorney, conveyancer, notary public, and certified director. Teresa Yates is the National Director of probono.org. Previously, Teresa was the Deputy National Director of the Legal Resources Center and has not only legal training, but a background in human rights and development on the continent. I will now hand over to Tilly, who will introduce our guest speaker.
Thank you, Abongile. Our guest speaker today is Thobelo Motsoane, the founder of Sister-in-Law. Thobelo is an attorney by profession and obtained her law degree from the University of Johannesburg. In her personal capacity, she is a mother and a wife. Professionally, Thobelo is currently a consultant at Rams Incorporated and a managing director at Collective Intelligence Legal Consultants. Thobelo established Sister-in-Law, her passion project, in 2018 after realizing that women would often approach her for legal insights pertaining to their households and domestic violence. She came to realize that the lack of education and resources for women dates back to when her parents divorced and her mother was not privileged enough to know basic legal concepts pertaining to the consequences of divorce, child maintenance, and estate planning. Her interest in this field is what led her to pursuing a degree in law and ultimately incorporating Sister-in-Law, which is a platform dedicated to empowering women and the community through legal education. The platform also extends to creating awareness around gender-based violence and facilitating campaigns which encourage women and children to speak out against GBV and men to speak and act against injustices against women and children. We will now hand over the floor to Siva and Teresa, who are going to start the dialogue. Over to you, Siva.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are so thrilled to have each and every one of you joining us for today, our second webinar in a four-part series entitled Our Stories Matter, a dialogue with women in law. I'm honored to be sharing this space with Teresa Yates from probono.org as we engage in rich dialogue with women in law. Today, we extend a very warm welcome to Thobelo Motsoane from Sister-in-Law. Thobelo, we are honored to be spending the next while with you, and thank you for giving us your valuable time. Welcome. So, Thobelo,
thank you so much. Thank you.
Wonderful to have you. So, can you give us a little bit of insight about you, Thobelo? What is your background? A little bit of insight.
First and foremost, thank you to Tilly for such an explosive introduction. It didn't sound like she was talking about me. And, thank you to LegalWise and probono.org for putting such a phenomenal series together. Very, very important. So about myself, I am a 31-year-old attorney based in Johannesburg, born and bred in Johannesburg in Pretoria. I come from parents who are both Sotho, from Lesotho, and I come from a family which was pretty, I want to say well off compared to Justice Theron's story last week. We had a toilet and running water in the house. We had access to education. We had access to resources, a roof over our heads. And, I've always been in a position where I never had to want something that was somebody else's. And that also just speaks into my upbringing. I grew up initially with both my parents, my mom and my dad. They were married for 6 years of my life. They divorced when I was 7 years old. And I've always been grateful that I've had a very, very good and solid relationship with both my parents. I've always been grateful that they also, remained friends once the initial dust of the divorce was settled, And I've just always looked up to both of them for the valuable contributions they've had to my life. So I grew up in Midrand most of my life, attended school in Midrand as well, and then attended university at the University of Johannesburg. And the reason why I pursued law, I've got two brothers, by the way, two younger brothers. I'm the firstborn, which makes me a deputy parent as well. They say firstborns are deputy parents. So I chose law because initially I was just very passionate about wanting to understand more about why my parents did things in a certain way when they got divorced. For me, it was a very new concept that, I had a routine at home. I was used to my dad leaving for work in the morning, and then my mom taking care of us, making sure that, lunch is ready. When we come back from school, she's helping us with homework and so forth. And then having my dad come later in the evening to join us. So that routine then changed when there was a divorce. We were only allowed to see my dad every second weekend and every second holiday, and on, special events. And for me, that was something that really messed with my routine. So I wanted to understand more of that. And in studying law, luckily in the very first year, we did persons and family law. And that gave me an understanding of what was going on when my own parents divorced. Fast forward to a few years later, I didn't really have a particular interest in family law, but it really did come back to me through sister-in-law. And that's my journey up until today.
Okay, thank you. And that's an interesting start of your life. And we just want to follow up. I just want to follow up on that and ask you, as you were growing up, who inspired you to stick with your education, to become a professional woman? Were there particular people in your life who inspired you to come onto this path?
Sure, Teresa, I absolutely love that question because it's so personal and so sentimental to me. So, like I said earlier, I grew up where my father was working and my mom was always at home. But when she got divorced, she then had to pursue her degree. She was a full-on housewife when she was married to my dad. She then had to pursue her degree. And during those times, we didn't have a helper looking after us. So my mom had to take me with her to the library every Saturday because there was no one to look after me. She had to take me with her to the library, and she really instilled the concept of reading. Every single Saturday morning, I would sit in the library for hours on end in a corner on a beanbag reading until words literally came out of my ear. And the one thing that she's always pushed has been getting an education. She always said, you have to do better. You have to do better than me. I'm not going to allow you to think that, you'll be rescued by marriage, because that's not how it is. And I don't want you going into the world having an expectation that somebody else has to provide for you, you know, not in my lifetime. And she really, really instilled the concept of education, the importance of education, the importance of reading. You know, when we spoke last week, I told you that I really just still love reading to this day. All I do is read different things, fiction, non-fiction, law, non-law. And she really just instilled that into me. And I really commend her for that. Even when I fell pregnant at age 19, I thought that, you know, the world is coming to an end. What am I going to do? I'm in my first year of studies. I had done particularly well, but I thought my mom was going to say, listen, you really have to reconsider the whole school thing and just at least raise, you know, your son for a few years, and then you'll pick up school once he's older. But she didn't say that. She literally took my son as her own, and I continued with school uninterrupted for the duration of my degree. And I really owe much of who I am to her, and, you know, how she stressed the importance of education.
Okay, thanks. Your mom sounds like a fantastic woman.
Yeah, it sounds like that would have been a tough one to deal with. And how did you cope, Tebelo, with being a very young mother and having to study at the same time, having your child at such a young age? How did you cope with that?
Like I said, she really played an important role in ensuring that I kept going to school. I think last week in the series, you mentioned that it takes a village to raise a child. And one memory that continuously comes back to me and still sends chills down my spine is the very first set of examinations that I had. So my son was born in January, and the very first set of examinations that I had was in June. And there was a particular exam where he was teething and he was really just sick. He had a fever the whole night. He was crying. He was just a mess, you know, that day. And I remember literally crying and thinking, I cannot write tomorrow's exam. I'm exhausted. He's tired. I'm tired. And I was just crying. And my mom walked into the room because I was scared to go knock on her room to say, I really need help, because she was so helpful, you know, during all my other exams. And I thought, I really need her to rest tonight, so I'm not going to write my exam tomorrow. And she came into my room at 1 a.m. She took my son, you know, took his temperature, and then decided to go to my aunt's house. So imagine my mom arriving at my aunt's house in the middle of the night with a crying baby who's got a fever, just to give me time to study for my last exam, because I had already reconciled with the fact that it's my last exam. I'm not going to make it. Let me figure out if there's a way that I can write a deferred exam. And that act of, you know, giving me the rest of the morning, the wee hours of the morning from 2 to about 8 a.m. till I wrote, really made such a huge impact in my life. And I only hope that I can extend that grace to other people that has been given onto me and shown to me.
Well, thanks so much for that. And I just want to point out also that your story highlights the importance of libraries and access to reading materials, because books in South Africa are so very expensive. The majority of people can't afford to walk into a bookshop and buy a book, but public libraries give children and people an opportunity to have access to a range of different books and literature. So that is so important. And it's nice to hear that that's where your love and passion for reading started. And so I just want to ask also, who inspires you now? You're a young woman at 31 and a professional woman. Where do you find your inspiration today?
Sure. From this conversation you've gathered, definitely my mother.
Yes.
But my father too, you know, I think he's really, the advantage with my father is that he had been in business long before my mom and in employment. So it's always been, you know, the best thing to get the best of both worlds. I've received the nurturing and the love and, you know, the softness from my mom, but I also received a lot of love from my dad, who I believe was or became a feminist because he had a daughter. So he's really just inspired me. Even when I said, okay, Dad, I'm not coping in the legal profession. I don't think law is for me. I don't think the traditional legal system is for me. I want to branch out and do my own thing, which will have impact, which will inspire women. I don't know what it looks like yet, but I know that this is something that I'm very passionate about doing, something that I'd like to really just break away from corporate, break away from law firms, and figure out how I can make something meaningful out of sustained law. And he was very supportive along that journey. And he really gave a lot of advice on how to, turn my skills in the legal profession into something that I really love, how to almost merge my love for journalism and speaking and being a social butterfly, how to just put it together and really make a business out of what I initially thought would have just been a movement. When I started Sustained Law, I thought it would just be a movement, but he really taught me how to think, in a business-minded fashion about it, and how to also not lose the impact portion of the platform. So yeah, he is one of my biggest inspirations. It's my parents. Then outside of my parents, it's definitely Michelle Obama. Anyone who knows me knows that I absolutely love Michelle Obama.
So you're a fan, and you've read Becoming, I take
yes.
it?
Yes, I've read Becoming, and I'm inspired by her story. I think it's because she started off as a lawyer as well. Then she broke away from that and wasn't sure what she wanted to pursue, but she knew that she wanted it to be impactful. So I see how our story, correlates. And she's also just big on sharing your story, or on women sharing their stories. And then we definitely all still draw inspiration from the women who took part in the Women's March in 1956. There's no doubt that their voices and the struggle and the march itself echoes in all of our lives today.
Great, thanks. Thank you so much. And just to say also about Michelle Obama, she's very much committed to ensuring that girls around the world obtain an education. And I think we can't say often enough of how important it is to educate the girl child here in South Africa, in the US, in Asia, and other parts of this continent. So I think anytime someone uses a platform the size of hers to stress that and to put their weight behind it, we can all be inspired by that. So thank you. Over to you, Siva.
Yeah, so Tebelo, you want to share with all our attendees, one of the reasons why we invited you was your investment in your baby, your passion project, sister-in-law. You want to tell us what drove it? What was the rationale behind it, and where's it going to?
I really don't get tired of speaking to this platform. The impact that it has had is bigger than me, and I never imagined it to be bigger than me. Sometimes I wake up and I think, wow, this is so interesting that I don't know if you recall in the conversation earlier, I told my dad that this is what I want to do, but I don't know if I have a name for it yet. I don't know if I have a core objective for it yet, but I know that I want it to be impactful. And the impact really extends beyond just me. So this passion project came as a result of women often asked me about issues pertaining to marriage contracts, child maintenance, divorce, estate planning, and issues of domestic violence. And I thought, why is it that my clients who are coming for commercial law services always need help with what I like to call their home affairs? Why is this information not accessible to, businesswomen, to women on the street? Then I thought, how can I bridge what you would ordinarily pay for at a law firm, or what you'd ordinarily have access to if you're sitting in a courtroom, or if you work in the legal space? How can I bridge that between the average woman on the street and access to justice itself, or access to the law? And I thought, let me make a educational platform out of this thing that I now don't have a core objective for. And that's how the tagline came along, that it's a platform dedicated to empowering women through legal education. And that's exactly what I do. So I don't think that a woman has to pay to know what the consequences of not having a marriage contract in place are. I don't think that a woman has to pay for to learn the importance of having a will. A lot of women would come to me and say, my parents were married in community of property, my mom has died, and my estranged father has come back to kick us out of the house. What are my rights? It's information like that leaves other women feeling displaced or being displaced, when especially their mother dies, or a breadwinner who was a mom who didn't have a will in place. So it's information like that that I really thought it's no longer right for women to be, displaced. For example, when a breadwinner, the husband passes away without a will, and then his family comes and kicks her out of the house and takes her children away from her. Literally, in the Black community especially, these stories do happen, that husbands die and women aren't able to assert their rights. And one of the cases that really put this under the microscope was the HHP case, which I believe we're all familiar with. And for me, that was just an affirmation that the work that I do through sister-in-law is really, it's pressing, it is needed, and it's needed to extend onto a larger scale. So issues like, women didn't even know that child maintenance is something that they can apply for by themselves without having to pay an attorney. And it's just sort of teething minor issues like that I really believe that can change a woman's life, and not only a woman's life, but usually a household and a community at large, because the fewer women there are who are displaced by way of not knowing their basic rights, the better our community and the better our country will be.
I must say, the longer I am in the profession and the older I get, the more I realize that basic advice on basic citizenship rights, basic rights as to consumer rights, all of that we take for granted. Being in the profession, I think we take that for granted. I think we don't fully acknowledge the role that lawyers and institutions play in the transmitting of this knowledge in a way that's non-intimidating, that's not threatening, but empowering to people.
100%.
No, fabulous. We're so glad to have heard about sister-in-law. The fact that you're using social media to actually extend this knowledge is also a novelty, is it not, Thobelo?
100%. I think definitely social media has given me a wider reach than I would have had, say, 15 years ago, for example. It's definitely made word of mouth that much easier. But I do believe that the people who need the knowledge the most, unfortunately, are women who don't even have access to a smartphone, let alone Facebook or Instagram. And I'm really trying to work towards having a mobile workshop in place once Corona is over, and just figuring out a way that beyond COVID, or if we find ourselves being in the digital space for longer than expected, how can I get laptops into communities to enable women to, have access to even a webinar where I'm just sharing insights on especially having a will in place, for women in rural areas, especially understanding things like if you're in a rural area and your husband works in the suburbs, he most likely has a policy with his employer, just educating women on how to receive funds from those policies once their husbands pass away, and just other basic legal knowledge that I can actually get into rural areas where access to data, access to a smartphone, access to social media, access to even education as a whole is still a challenge. I'm really working towards getting there.
Thank you. And I think that's so important. I always stress that the access to basic legal services, to the day-to-day services that impact the things that touch our lives is so important, because it communicates to ordinary South Africans, to people across the board, that the law is there to serve them as well. It's not just the law for the rich and for the well-connected, that the law and the Constitution and our rights are there for us all, especially the most marginalized amongst us. So thank you for all that you do to promote that.
Thank you.
And then, go ahead,
Sorry,
Siva.
Teresa. No. The question that I was going to pose is, so do you see the relevance for digitization of the law, Thobelo, in your work so far?
100%. I mean, that 4IR has always been pending and lurking. I think the pandemic just sped up the process, just escalated things. And we've definitely come to digitization a lot sooner than we ever would have anticipated. And in trying to find creative ways to share information on COVID-19, for example, I hope we can use the same energy to share issues of the law. Like you said, basic consumer protection, basic labor law, or labor protection, basic employment law, for example. So I really think that digitization, especially during a time such as now, is important. Like I said earlier, one of the barriers to that will still remain access to data, access to a smartphone.
I think that's something that yesterday we met with a future delegate on our webinar series. And I think yesterday Teresa and I were chatting to her about that, which is a question of how expensive data and access to a digital platform is for most women, and how easy it is to commodify the law that if you had access, I'll hand over to Teresa now to ask you the next question that I'm sure she's going to jump in on.
No, that's really important, and I think this COVID time has highlighted to us the importance of access to digitization, to those things that those of us who are more privileged often take for granted. But in these times of limited social contact, we're really seeing the importance of the access and what hinders people when they don't have access to these tools. So that's going to be something that we definitely will have to be looking into with some of us as we move out of this kind of lockdown life, and as we start to vision a new future for ourselves. But also, Tebelo, getting back to your story, your personal story, can you share with us some of the challenges that you've faced and how you've overcome those? We know being a young mother is a big challenge for all of us, for many people, and obviously having your mother there as a support, a strong support system for you. But what have been some other challenges that you've faced, and do you want to share with us some of the learnings that you've taken from those challenges?
Yeah, I think in my personal life, one of the biggest challenges was definitely being a young mom. I mean, it's still challenging today, but things are so much better, honestly. That was the biggest thing or challenge to overcome. And I think the way that I managed to overcome that was really just getting the degree. It was the one thing that kept me going, because I was like, I've been given a second chance, or I've been given a chance which I was never oblivious to the privilege that existed in that. Had that been, had I had the same set of facts applying to me, but being in a different, environment. Had I been in a family that can barely put me through school, for example, I know that carrying on with school while there's a minor wouldn't have been a possibility. So I've never been oblivious to that privilege. And I really, really just used that to give myself that second chance, to forgive myself for, the mistakes that I had made, and to really just pursue a life where I can say, okay, I've made these mistakes, but I've been able to correct them. I've been given the platform to correct them. And how will I be able to extend that grace to others? Like I said, one of the other challenges that I came across was when I first started my business. When I first started my business, there was a time when I was making a lot of money at the time. It really, considering that people were saying, when you go into business, you're not going to make money for the first 5 years, and it's going to be you're going to be depressed all the time. It's going to be a dry season for 5 years. And in the first year, I really got lucky with good paying clients who had a really good network themselves, and referred some of that work to me. So the money started coming in, and I became a little bit reckless with my finances. I really hadn't taken an interest in personal finances, and because I didn't have an interest in personal finances, I didn't know how to manage the business finances. As a result, I then got into a lot of money trouble. I had a compliance issue at the time as well that set me back about 35,000 Rand. And at the time of the young age of the business, I think I was 9 months into it, that was a lot of money to lose. That then led me to going back to full-time employment, very, very reluctantly and painfully so. Had to go back to corporate to find out a way to pay off the business debt, to find out a way to also pay off my personal debt, because now I had gotten myself into debt through the business debts. And it really started making me be more conscious about personal finance, about the importance of personal finance. I then started reading Huffington Post, Elevest. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Elevest, and basically tools that were dedicated to empowering women about their personal finances, about budgeting, about managing, the money that comes in, and about investing as a whole. So I think one of the biggest challenges that I faced was a money-related, challenge where for a few months I really found myself on the wrong side of debt.
Okay, thank you.
That's a tough lesson to learn. That's a tough lesson to learn.
Yeah.
That's a tough lesson to learn. And I think, what does an empowered woman look like to you? With hindsight, what does an empowered woman look like to you now?
Sure. From my personal experience, it's definitely a woman who's able to manage her finances. And managing finances isn't even something that's new to women. I think most people are very familiar with a household where, their fathers would bring in the money, but their moms would be the one who allocate those funds to various things, like ensuring that school fees is paid for, ensuring that, the kids have school uniform that's up to date, or their textbooks are up to date, or ensuring that just the household is taken care of as a whole. So, personal finance isn't even a concept that is really new to us. But an empowered woman really looks like someone who can manage her finances, somebody who is deliberate about lifting as she rises. That is, a topic I'm very passionate about. And someone that is deliberate about using her voice to amplify the voices of those who cannot speak for themselves.
Yes, thank you. That's very important. And I think you're absolutely right on an empowered women. Sometimes we find people whom, even though they are very successful in the public eye, anyways, still seem to be a little bit insecure and afraid to lift other people up because they think it might undermine their own position in their profession or in their society, in society. And I just think that it's such a wrong way of thinking, particularly those of us who are further along in our careers. It's so important to serve as mentors, to serve as advisors to younger people coming along, because we never solve our problems. Social justice is a journey, it's not a destination. And we stand on the shoulders of those people who come before us. So if we're not willing to offer our shoulders to stand on, then we don't make progress from generation to generation. So that is so important.
My mantra, that is the quote that I live by.
Yes, great. Let's talk a little bit about gender stereotyping, because I think as professional women, we always encounter people who want to label us as with particular gender stereotypical traits, like, oh, you're so sensitive, you're so nurturing. And if we don't fit within the mold, if we fit more into what people think of as descriptors for men, like we're ambitious and we're powerful and aggressive or competitive, somehow those become negative traits for women, and then we become demeaned as witches and other horrible names that I won't say online. So I don't know if you've encountered people who try and undermine you based on these types of stereotypes, or what would you have to say to other women who are experiencing some of these challenges?
Thank you. Very important question. I love that question, particularly because when I first started, working for myself, my dad, once again, managed to have a very important conversation with me. And he was like, as you may recall that every time you've come to visit me, I've never expected you to do things like cooking or, washing dishes or doing the laundry or whatever. But I've always tried to make it a task between you and your brother to share equally. That is because I was trying to, do away with gender stereotypes and making, you believe that your place is in the kitchen and that your brother's place is, helping me fix the car in the garage. When he started teaching me how to drive, he also taught my brother at the same time. He was like, I need both of you to be in the same place and learn how to do it, even if the other is too young to drive. I need both of you to learn the concept of driving at the same time, because if I'm not here to teach the other how to drive, I at least want you to have had the same experience. And the most important thing that my dad taught me about gender stereotypes is that it's not even, he really said, I dislike the word submission. A woman does not have to submit to a man, or a woman does not have to submit to any sort of institutionalized concept or patriarchal concept. But if there's mutual respect for each other, people will submit to you anyway. So if I respect Siva, she's going to want to hear my ideas. And if she respects me, vice versa. And he just taught me that the basic concept of getting along with people or getting along in a system that seems to be against you is to always humble yourself by being respectful. So I've carried that with me even into spaces where, I thought, okay, here I'm being undermined, and even in teaching people how to treat me, I had to always remember to do it in a respectful manner. Because once you start becoming defensive and making a fight out of something or screaming, nobody's going to listen to you, because you've already given them, the upper hand by saying, you see, women are emotional. So if you're able to, assert yourself in a manner that doesn't need you to particularly make a noise or to use incorrect or defamatory language, I always aim to do that rather than fighting or raising my voice or giving people the gender specific reactions that they were anticipating. So I always try to come from a space of respect in any interaction that I come across.
Yes, yeah, it's almost like treating people who are disrespectful toward us like children. And with children, we know we have to lead by example. Yeah, children watch everything we do. And that's an important lesson to learn as well. Thank you.
He did emphasize though, just to go back, he did emphasize though that some of the systems in place, they're not always just black and white, and that a lot of patriarchy actually is embedded in religion. He's found that, he was very big on studying other religions or just becoming more knowledgeable about that. But he found that a lot of, religious beliefs really do end up putting women on the back foot. And they're the reason, and religion is the reason why some of the patriarchy that exists has managed to be so strong and so rife in our communities and in the world as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I won't get into a discussion on religion, I think, on this platform, because I'm sure we have a broad range of people with beliefs, and they say don't talk about religion and politics. But there is truth in that. Absolutely, there's absolutely truth in that. Siva, I'll hand over to you.
So if there was one gender taboo that you could wish were broken, what would that be?
Gender taboo. Sure, I can't think of one right now.
Okay.
I can't think of one right now. I'll get back to you on that one.
Perhaps some of our attendees can tell us what would be one sort of taboo you wished around gender could be broken. So that will just help us out.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Someone has put into the chat unequal pay.
Yes. Definitely that. And just the concept that, women can't, or women are inferior, women aren't strong enough to do certain tasks. Women aren't emotionally equipped to fulfill certain tasks. That's the one thing that I would really like
For me, it would be
crush.
that women are not strong enough.
Yeah, women are not.
That's enough to rile me.
Yes,
What's
yes.
yours, Teresa?
I just want to say Kanyo Ngwenya has written
Yes.
the notion that men are better than women. There's so many. I think I don't even know. I don't even know where to start. But it is also an idea that women are designed to engage in certain activities. So it's wrapped up in women are not strong enough. Women are not as good as men. But the idea that you can't do certain things because you have particular traits as a woman gets back to the stereotyping that, okay, you have to take care of the children because you're a woman and you're nurturing. You have to do the cooking because you're a woman. You have to try and go into certain types of professions because you're a woman. Even within the law, you shouldn't litigate because you're a woman. You should maybe stick to, trusts and estates, those kinds
family
of
law.
areas. Yes, where except people don't understand how contentious family law can be.
Absolutely.
So yes, I think that would be it. The notion that there's slots for us within society, and those slots are predetermined by your gender. Yeah.
I actually have our dear moderator Tilly and Abongile in my ear to tell us that it's now time to move on to questions and answers. So to our attendees, if I could please say, if you have questions which you've not posed as yet, please do pop them into our chat box, and then we will pose them through to Bello to invite engagement on it. But for the time being, Tabelo, we had one that came in on registration from Mbantlentle Gambushe, who is a student at UNISA. She says, women find themselves in a patriarchal system. What can be done to ensure that women in law are treated with the same respect and given the same credits as men?
Mm-hmm. Wow. So that just ties into the question you've just asked. I honestly think that first and foremost, platforms and conversations like the ones we're having today are very important. It's of particular importance for younger women to understand that women, and maybe particularly women of color, can occupy certain spaces. I think we've done an incredible job as South African women to set really, really good examples to show that we are able to take up space in the positions that we occupy in the legal space and outside of the legal profession. I think there are some phenomenal women who have really done phenomenal things. And if that's not enough to prove that women are worthy of being being in certain positions, being CEOs like yourself, Siva, then I don't know what more we need. But conversations like these are very important, where we highlight the stories of phenomenal women in law so that younger people can be motivated and inspired all the time to break those gender roles, or to break those stereotypes. I mean, I myself was very, very inspired by Judge Theron's story last week. I was just like, when am I going to get to all these years of wisdom? And when she shared a lot of the challenges that she faced, particularly as a woman of color, I was like, it's such a reaffirming to know that some of the challenges that I've experienced in the legal profession are not unique to me. They are experienced by so many other women in the profession and outside of the profession. So it's stories like hers that make us know and believe that we can overcome those gender stereotypes.
Thank you. And I think that is very important in having these conversations and learning about other people's stories. Sometimes you experience things and you think you're the only one and that there's something wrong with you, but then you hear of other people's journeys and you do understand that it's not just you. These are systemic things that we all have to fight to overcome. Just one question in the chat. Natalie Jane DeLange asks, how does your work with sister-in-law tie into the work you do through the Collective Cares Foundation? And how do you juggle your time between the two organizations?
Oh, okay. That's somebody that's been following me for quite some time, clearly. So Collective Cares Foundation was a manner for me to give back, because I've always believed, like I said at the beginning of the conversation, that you have to, lift as you rise. We do not exist in isolation. We are not islands, like Justice Theron said last week. We are a community. And, earlier in the conversation, that I always said that I wish that the grace that was extended to me by my mom in me pursuing education, that I can give it to someone else. So there's a children's home that I work very closely with here in Centurion called Dimponyana Children's Home. And I just run different campaigns every year, teaching soft skills, how to draft CVs, how to prepare for interviews, providing sanitary wear for the young girls there, also contributing books and doing book drives for their library, very big on libraries. And as Teresa mentioned earlier, public libraries are very good, but if you're at a children's home, you don't always have access to a public library. So I've really tried to work around bringing books to them and setting up their own children's library at the home. So Collective Cares Foundation, which is now the Sister-in-Law Foundation, I've had to change the name because I'm doing more work with sister-in-law. It's the same thing, just giving back to the community. And it's really easy when it's not a task for you. It's something that I'm passionate about. So I never have to find ways to juggle the two. I never feel like one is suffering at me paying attention to the other. It's something that I'm continuously doing in the background, just ensuring that every opportunity I get to lift as I rise, I take it with both hands.
Great, thank you. Siva?
So Muchengeti asks a very, very pertinent question, one that I think most of us in the profession struggle with. She writes, a recent court judgment out of the Western Cape High Court revealed that there are 14 Black female advocates in the whole of the Western Cape. This is an appalling statistic. How do we address Black women's representation in the profession?
Sure. So I also host a podcast which is called Sisters in Conversation. And on that podcast, I profile various Black women in the legal profession and women of color in the legal profession. And one of the major talks that we have, or one of the major topics that are discussed at about 80% of the interviews, is issues of transformation in the legal profession. And unfortunately, my question didn't get to Justice Theron last week, but I actually really wanted to engage her on the topic of how can we ensure that, just at least for pupillage, how can we ensure that there's some sort of stipend? Because that is a barrier to people becoming advocates. Not as many women are able to pursue pupillage or are able to pursue night classes because of issues like gender-based violence. And even if I am able to pursue, my pupillage, there's always that factor of I have to do it with no income. We all know that if you don't have an income, it's very difficult to get to and from your lessons. So that is the first barrier to women actually becoming advocates. We have to find a way to start a fund where we can actually give a stipend to indigent persons who want to pursue a career in advocacy. Another thing that I can say is, that also translates to fewer women of color becoming judges. With us in South Africa, we don't have, that module to study towards being a judge. And unlike in the UK, I think it is, where at university level, you can already study to be a judge. So that already creates an even longer period for women to become judges from, say, the time they graduate.
Absolutely. I think it's a worthy point and something that the profession is struggling with. It's amazing that our profession has taken such a long time to transform, because it's not for the want of, good, valuable intelligent, smart candidates. It's just that the barriers of entry into the profession remain its single most hurdle.
Yeah, yeah. I know a lot of people who would have wanted to pursue pupillage, but because there's no stipend, they first have to do their articles, save money for a few years, and then consider coming back later. It's very difficult still, you know. It's
the
not
same with candidates. It's the same
Yeah.
with candidates. If you recall, the furor that's been brewing over the last few months has been around candidates and the requirement and prerequisite for candidate attorneys to have their own particular mode of transport. Now, that in itself is a barrier to entry in profession, because how many people have private transport that will get them around? You know, it's noteworthy to say that the Legal Practice Council has asked firms to dispense with that requirement, you know. But having said that, yeah, I hear you on the stipend issue, without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah. And that just raises, I mean, the issue. Someone did put in the comments that the Joburg Bar does have a stipend program, but it's
even KZN.
But
it's limited.
Yeah. But
Teresa,
it's limited, and when you think about the costs that people have to incur from, you know, transport and living, it's generally not enough. I think it's generally not enough money. So there's so many costs associated with being in the profession. There are other questions that are coming through, so I don't want to talk and run out of time. One person, Sinotili Zondi, says she's inspired by your story. And she says, what would you advise to upcoming women in law who find themselves facing similar challenges to you, such as trying to make it in a largely patriarchal society historically designed to benefit men?
Sure. Thank you, Sino, for that question. I'm just going to share the tools and advice that I usually share with my mentees. I do mentor law students, particularly female law students. And one of the things that I say is that you first have to know yourself. When you know yourself, you're able to answer the why. And when you're able to answer the why, you really can take every challenge that comes against you or that you come across, you know, with a pinch of salt. I think when you know why you are in the legal profession and what you want to get out of it, or why you're pursuing a degree in law, you'll really be able to take things with a thick skin. I always say that some of the situations we find ourselves in are not a personal attack on us. If you find yourself working at a law firm that has been around for years and, you know, it's male and pale, you know, they are also dealing with their own upbringing, you know. They are dealing with their own conditioning. And unfortunately, people bring that to the workplace, which should, I think, for all purposes, be neutral. And it's not a you thing. It's just a way somebody has been conditioned. But if you stick to who you are and knowing your why, you really should be able to push through those challenging moments. And I also believe in creating a space in your working environment where you're able to confront those kind of issues. A lot of things are brushed under the carpet because we keep quiet. We don't use our voices. Issues of, sexual harassment, for example, sexual harassment at the workplace. A lot of, solutions don't come because we haven't created safe working environments for ourselves. We haven't identified other women who can help us build strength in numbers. So I really think also just creating and being deliberate about creating a working environment where you can confront issues head on will really be able to, you know, break some of the challenges that exist.
Great. Thank you. I think over to you. Just looking through to see if there are other, and by the way, that last question, the Sino is actually Siobonga Zondi, so the name that I see on the question is not the name that we see.
Thank you, Sia.
There is a question asking for legal advice on something. And just to say, this is not a platform where we're going to be giving out legal advice. So for that person, I'm just scrolling up to find the question. Yeah, for Karishma, if you're still with us, that question you can contact the pro bono office, or you can contact Tebelo. It's a question, a family law question. So you can call our office, and we can give you advice about the client that you have. So yes, just to say, we're not giving legal advice over this platform, but you can contact us if you have an issue.
So quick wrap, 30
Yes.
seconds, Tebelo. What is your advice to aspirant women lawyers?
Sure. There is an audience even in one person. So if you can use your voice to change the mindset or to change the perspective of one person, then your job is, halfway done. I really think people undermine the strength or the power of their own voices, and they undermine the strength or the power of their own stories. But there's always someone looking up to you. You're an inspiration to someone. Your story inspires someone. How you advocate for people and how you defend yourself also really inspires someone. So really just use your voice to change someone's perspective and to just be a board of positive energy to others.
Leave it to Teresa to say our thank yous to you, Tebelo, but it was marvelous chatting.
It was a pleasure being on this platform. Thank you, ladies.
No, thank you so much. And these hours go by so quickly, which just means that, that the story is so compelling. Just to say thank you for sharing your inspiring story of courage and strength with us. And you've certainly given us a lot of food for thought on how our roles as women, both young and old, can shape the society we yearn to see in this beautiful country. So thank you so much, Tebelo, and we look forward to seeing and hearing so much more from you as we move forward.
Thank you. In the 10 seconds that I have as well, I've seen quite a lot of comments about people speaking about workshops where we can extend my voice. I can be contacted on advice@sisterinlaw.co.za. That's advice with a C.
Thank you so much, Tebelo. So we're going to end with a call to action. So our question to all our attendees out there: what is your story of courage and strength? And how are you continuing the legacy of the women of 1956, of finding ways to narrate your unique stories and making your unique voices heard? So thank you all for joining us today, and we will now hand back to Tilly.
Tebelo, it is such an honor for you to have shared your story with us. By sharing your story through our Stories Matter, you have truly inspired, motivated, and encouraged us. Thank you, everyone who joined us for today's webinar. Please remember to join us for the next webinar on the 21st of August, when we will be in conversation with the enchanting Candice Pillay from Lawtons Africa, who is a pro bono lawyer focusing on human rights litigation. Thank you for your time and have a wonderful day further. Goodbye.
We hope you all enjoyed today's dialogue. Please don't forget to complete the brief survey before you log off. Goodbye, everyone, and have a lovely weekend.